So with that, we are moving towards our first and final plenary session of this day, on the day forward. Before we start with this, I just want to also express again a big thank you to the amazing work of the coordinators in the course of the last phase of the policy network, and especially yesterday. A special thank you again to the members of the contact groups who worked really hard and intensively on the operational approaches documents. And thank you very much for all the dedication yesterday in the discussions of all the participants who are here. And I want to say something that I realized yesterday in the discussions after the conference. Something that struck me is this atmosphere of collaboration. People to whom I talked yesterday, when I asked how did it go, were you happy with the discussions yesterday and the results, they almost took this collaborative spirit in the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network for granted, as if it's the only way those discussions could happen. I think this is an amazing achievement, and it was really touching to hear this. And I just want to share this, that I think this is the spirit of the policy network. With this, before we go into the Way Forward session, we would like to take the opportunity to present to you, the stakeholders here in this room, a few plans on how to organize the next steps. If I could please have the slide again. So, as you see in this timeline of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, we are increasing the rhythm between the global conferences. Why do we do this? We do this because the programs, they mature, they grow, and the work, as you heard also from the coordinators, becomes more detailed and more focused. So it's very important to give the space for the programs to really work intensively, as the work is complex and deserves attention. This is why the 4th Global Conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network is going to take place in 2021, and next year, in 2020, there will be dedicated global program meetings of each of the 3 programs of the policy network. And this will allow to really, we hope as the Secretariat, to really catalyze well the development of operational solutions and policy standards. And as you can also see in this timeline, the organization of each program will be done in the following way. There will be regular virtual program meetings. The work is ongoing, of course. And there will be a contact group to steer the work. And there will be 2 initial working groups that you all discussed yesterday in terms of what is the best roadmap for them to continue their work and to start their work in the next phase of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. If I can have the video feed again. It is a great pleasure of the plenary, please. It is a great pleasure, thank you. It is a great pleasure to make a very important announcement that we as the Secretariat are very happy about on this occasion. To accommodate the growth and the maturation of the programs of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, on the occasion of this 3rd Global Conference, it is really a great pleasure to announce that the Secretariat is hiring experienced directors, dedicated directors, for each of the programs of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. And we would like to announce the first 2 of those directors who are here with us today. If you can please stand up. Hansel Park will join the Secretariat from the United Nations Security Council in New York to become the director of the Data and Jurisdiction Program. And Frane Maroevic will join the Secretariat from the OSCE in Vienna to become the director of the Content and Jurisdiction Program. If we can please have some applause for that. And I would like to give the floor first to Hansel Park to address you, the stakeholders of the policy network.
Thank you, Paul. Very nice to meet you. My name is Hansel Park. I just left my previous job. Previously, I was working, I was one of the 2 legal officers in the Counterterrorism Directorate under the UN Security Council. among my work, we were focusing on the nexus between terrorism and the internet, and the majority of work was about the digital evidence project that we launched with UNODC and International Association of Prosecutors. So that, with that, we were working with the law enforcement authorities and also private sector to make sure to implement the Security Council resolutions to preserve and use the digital evidence. I'm very excited to utilize my experience for the future work of INJ and with all of you in the room. Thank you very much.
So good morning. As Paul mentioned, look forward to joining the team as of September with my quite substantial experience in the intergovernmental sector. Currently, I'm a director at the Office of the OSCE Representative on Freedom of the Media, international intergovernmental organization dealing with freedom of expression. I've been working on media freedom and freedom of expression now for 20 years, and before that I was a journalist, so dealing with content issues practically all my working life. I look forward very much to working also with Wolfgang, and as Wolfgang eloquently presented many of the challenges that we have, especially in the content field and the content sector, where we have so many also diverging views about what is legal, what is possible, what is moral, what is acceptable, harmful, and so on. It will be quite a demanding challenge ahead, and as I think Bertrand mentioned earlier on, I don't think we are looking for one solution to fit all. We are looking to find something that is useful, that is helpful, and that can preserve the internet as the greatest tool for communication, for commerce, for trade that we have ever created, and that we can preserve our fundamental human rights online as well as offline in any way possible. So look very much forward to working with all of you. Many of you I already know very well, and look forward to getting to know the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the Secretariat is still in the process of also hiring the director of the Domains and Jurisdiction Program. The arrival of senior level directors and additional staff in the Secretariat will allow the best possible facilitation of multi-stakeholder cooperations in the programs to also efficiently build on the outcomes of the operational approaches documents and the discussions here that we are having in Berlin. Moreover, the Secretariat is responding to the requests of more stakeholders in the policy network to also explore the application of the proven methodology for multi-stakeholder cooperation to further very pressing cross-border legal challenges on the internet. And this is why we have launched a new initiative on IoT and jurisdiction to explore the specific transnational challenges of connected devices and the fourth industrial revolution. And we had the first exploratory meeting earlier this year here in Berlin that gathered a small number of actors to test, and we are very excited to announce that there will be follow-up activities in the course of the next period of this first additional initiative, which is by no means yet a full program. It is moreover, if I can have the timeline again, it is moreover, as we said, and it's really amazing to hear already now, as we have just launched the world's, or the key findings of the world's first Internet and Jurisdiction Global Status Report, that already many comments here in the room of people who just went through it overnight basically stated its usefulness for the community and for all the actors around the world that deal with those issues. And this is exactly the intended purpose. We're excited that we are going to launch the full version of the first and initial and inaugural Global Status Report on the occasion of the United Nations Internet Governance Forum that will be equally hosted by Germany this November here in Berlin. And we really hope that it will become a useful tool for evidence-based policy making and capacity building. And we hope that it will thereby also complement the focused work in the programs of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network and build capacities to bring additional members up to speed around the world. The Secretariat therefore invites all stakeholders, all of you here in the room who have not participated in the initial phase of the data collection, from July until September of this year, to contribute your data, to share your views on the ecosystem with the Secretariat and the author of the report, Dan Swantesen, so that we can have the best possible baseline that we can release on the occasion of the IGF this year. Moreover, we are incredibly excited, as you can see on the timeline, that we are going to also launch a first regional status report right after the release now of the key findings. We are very happy that in partnership with United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, we will launch a regional status report for 2020. And it is then the objective and the plan to build on the first baseline edition of the Global Status Report, the additional contributions from Latin America to further increase the data collection and knowledge gathering for a second global edition that will be launched in time for the 4th Global Conference. Last but not least, if I can have the feedback, last but not least, the Secretariat seeks to further increase specific regional outreach and engagement activities. 5 events are already planned right now. There will be a regional engagement event in South America in partnership with United Nations CEPAL, in North America, specifically in Silicon Valley, in Europe in partnership with the European Commission, and in Asia for a first event in India, and in Africa in Addis Ababa. And aligned with the strategic objective for fostering regional engagement and partnerships, we are also very delighted to share with you in this room that we have signed a first memorandum of understanding with the United Nations Commission in Latin America, a 5-year memorandum of understanding after a first joint regional conference that we held last November in Santiago de Chile for the region.
Thank you, Paul. This is an important work program, as you can see. I am personally extremely excited to welcome Hans-Sol and Frane to the team. The work we're doing is to the service of the community, is to the service of the network. And as you know, and I said that in Ottawa, it's usually a sort of perfunctory thing to give the thanks to the supporters and so on. This is not the way I feel, because the thank you that I want to make now to all the supporters that make this possible goes beyond the contribution that they make to the organization. It also incorporates the contribution that they make in terms of substance. And I want to recognize here, and again to say that everything that we're doing for you wouldn't be possible without the support of a certain number of actors. And I want to thank first, if I can have, the Global Conference hosts and partners, and particularly, as you can see in the absolute perfect organization of this space and the remarkable venue that has been provided, and also the great help in the preparatory process that the Bundesministerium for Economic Affairs and Energy has provided, and particularly Stefan Schnoor and his team. This has been a remarkable support, and we're extremely grateful, as we are still grateful because this is the trajectory we're on for the support that was provided by Canada last year for Ottawa and by France in 2016 for the first conference. The fact that we can have a partner that is a specific partner for each of the events is an extremely valuable and extremely important contribution. So if you can give a round of applause to Germany and the previous host, that would be wonderful. The second thing is that we have from the onset, and I really mean from day one, considered that international organizations, in their diversity, are full stakeholders in these types of exercise. That the Secretariat organized processes that are directly related to the work and that have a dynamic of their own, and that they can contribute also in this regard. And this is why we're extremely happy to benefit from the institutional support and extremely good relations with the 6 international organizations that include the Council of Europe, the European Commission, ICANN, OECD, UNESCO, and this year, as Paul mentioned, the 6th one has been added, the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America. And I want to make a caveat that when I say international organization, I understand the term in a very broad term because I know that there are sensitivities with putting ICANN or even the European Commission as an international organization. This is a generic term and we do recognize their differences. But thank you very much for all of them, and we look forward to enhancing the interactions with them in the months to come. So thank you very much. The traditional logorama for the financial supporters is important in many respects. One, because it shows the diversity of the financial contributors to the funding pool of Internet and jurisdiction. And the reason why I emphasize the diversity, that there are foundations, large companies, governments, technical operators, is that this is a guarantee for the neutrality of the work that we do. It's the demonstration of the trust that the different stakeholder groups have in this neutrality, and we are extremely happy to have now 31 entities that are joining at different types of level according to their capacity to contribute. This is growing, as Paul was mentioning before, on the, particularly on the global status report. And as you heard on the first day, it was a pleasure to have additional governments to join in. I'm really excited about the fact that there is growing understanding and commitment that there is a direct benefit in the work that is being done, and that fundamentally the reason why the actors are supporting, it's not only for the visibility, it's because they also care about the subject and they want it to be, they want them to be addressed. So a great thank you for the 31 entities that are currently contributors to the funding pool. I could only encourage all of you and all of them to also reach out to their peers and to their friends, to people in their own network, to explain the benefits that they take from this exercise and to encourage the broadening of the funding pool in order to be able to reach the next steps in the development. But thank you again to all these actors, and I'm really happy for the diversity that they represent. But there is something that I want to add. You know, this is normally you do just the thank you to the actors who provide financial support, etc. And we often do not recognize enough the fact that in-kind contributions, participation, is actually an element of financial support. When different entities or the government of Canada or different institutions allow somebody to be the coordinator or to be the facilitators of a particular group and allows them to spend a significant amount of time, it is an incredible contribution. And it is also a contribution for all of the members of the network, where there is, of course, an interest, but it is also a contribution that I think is extremely important to recognize, because each of you have to fight against your own schedule and your own workload, because this is not a priority of priorities in your work. So the time that you spend, and I can testify that in many of the groups during the finalization of the operational approaches, people were actually contributing on the final elements at wee hours at night on Sundays, and even at significant level of responsibilities in the different institutions that and entities that people were working in. So you have to fight against your own burden, your own work burden, but also to obtain the agreement from whoever you're working with that this is something that you have to contribute to. And so I would have been remiss in the thank you to the contributors to not take into account the remarkable contribution that and the importance of the contribution that the participants are providing. So this last round of applause is for you, actually. So go. I think with that, we will move to the first part of the last plenary, which is the traditional way forward. As usual, there will be a certain number of discussants that will make interventions, and the format is the same as the first day. I would encourage you to share also, as usual, raise your hand, have the three-minute slots. We'll try to make the dong a little bit less daunting than it was on the first day. But to share your thoughts, any thoughts about what happened in those 3 days. One idea that you didn't have before or that catalyzed. Even one line, even one expression, one person that you encountered, one understanding that emerged, or even something about what could be done better, what can be improved, what are the aspirations, what would you like us to do for you in the months to come. So this is a very open plenary. You've done an amazing work yesterday. We can now look forward, I think be proud of what you've accomplished in the last months and excited about what can be accomplished in the months to come. So with that, I give the floor to Paul to introduce the last plenary.
Absolutely. And as you remember from the first day, you can already now start raising your hand, and we will note your intervention. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Thomas FITSCHEN as our first discussant. He's Ambassador and Special Representative for Cyber Foreign Policy and Cybersecurity of the German Federal Foreign Office. Thomas, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I have only 3 minutes, I will skip the half page of praise for INJ and move to my proposals right away. I have 3+1. The first is, as a diplomat who has worked in UN contexts for a very long time, I would really like to urge INJ in their future work to include more experts from the Global South. The 3 groups and the conferences have done tremendous work, but for the end product we need more and early buy-in from other players, namely from those who we want to invite to make use of it. So working with ECLAC is a good first step, but we have way too few members from the African continent, and just have the pleasure of sitting next to one, and Asia, of course. The Global Status Report may already be a good vehicle to achieve that. My second point, INJ is not alone in the field. In addition to our good old MLATs that we all have, the EU is working on e-evidence, Council of Europe on the Budapest Protocol, and even the UN has developed a guidebook for public prosecutors in the field of terrorism. We think it would be extremely helpful to have a good explanation, maybe a 2-pager or 3-pager from the Secretariat or someone else that explains that none of this really interferes with each other. The idea is having something like a certificate of coherence or an explanation why we are not competing with others, but why we are trying successfully to make them interoperable, simply to be able to explain our work. Third point relates to my second one. When I talk to policymakers at home and regulators, they will for sure ask me, well, what does industry think about this? We know we have a lot of supporters from industry, but something like a statement of interest from industry, why this is important, why they would love us to be successful. Not necessarily individual companies to be identified, but a general statement why it's important for the private sector side of it. And my fourth point, or the 3+1, as we are entering into the last or next 2-year phase of work, maybe we should start thinking about really our end product. I know Bertrand hates the word end product. Your concept is a little different, but still, we need to think, once we have achieved something that is presentable, how we do it, how we feed this into the system, and what would be the right system to feed it into. Those are my recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas FITSCHEN, who's also a member of the Data and Jurisdiction Program, of course. I would now like to give the floor to Maria Pascanalis, who's the Executive Director of Derechos Digitalis and also a member of our advisory group. And Derechos Digitalis was also a member, or is a member, of the Content and Jurisdiction Program. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, and Jay, for having us. I would like to start to thank Juan Carlos Lara, who is sitting behind me, because a lot of the work that we have been able to accomplish here working in the network, it's because he was devoting a large part of his time in meaningfully contributing in the discussion in the content group and facilitating one of the working groups there. And echoing what Thomas was just saying, this is really relevant as us being a civil society organization coming from the global south, for really making true that wish of having more participation here of civil society or in general global south coming from different stakeholders. It's relevant to provide the condition for making that possible. It's not only being part of the invitation. There are a lot of things that are like much more restrictive in the environment that we work, and we need as a network to think together on how facilitate the opportunity for those to engage meaningfully in this debate. So in order to go to my recommendation in the moving forward, I will take 3 points mainly. The first one is like to be in the moving forward ambitious, but also very pragmatic in the terms of like fixing the priorities for having an achievable work and achievable goals. And I think that the work of the working groups that have been announced now, it will be very relevant in that sense. If we don't prioritize, even if we start for small action, we risk to lose relevance. And this will be yet another initiative that tries to cover everything and end without concrete outcomes. So that's the first thing. The second one is that prioritization, the need not to lose focus, that the main purpose of creating this initiative, it was like trying to solve jurisdictional problems. So when we are all together, there's a big temptation to increase the scope of the work that we are doing, because all the topics are really engaging and this is a really wonderful network of experts. But I invite you to don't lose in sight that the main focus for being effective in this task that we propose ourselves and that Bertrand and Paul challenge us to commit with is like solving jurisdictional issues. And that has a double meaning. A need of focusing jurisdictional problems that are part of each one of the streams, to find rule of conflict, to decide the complicated issues in each one of those fields, but at the same time not reinventing the wheel, acknowledge what is out there and how we can manage that. And finally, to be careful in that sense that we need in this look for consistency in what is existent out there. Don't lose outside that we cannot go in a race to the bottom. We need something that keep us like trying to keep the highest standards possible, and that is already existing, and they are well known. They are the international human rights standards. So I invite you to also like to think in how it can be a light that will keep us on track in achieving these rules of conflict, but with a clear sense of how to improve having the people, the global users, the global citizens on site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there already some interventions from the plenary that want to react or also share some takeaways from yesterday and on the way forward? If not yet, I would like to give the floor now to Pablo Bello, who's the Executive Director of the Inter-American Association of Telecommunications Companies, ASIET, and a member of the High-Level Advisory Group as well. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Paul, Bertrand. I also come from Latin America. In my region, more than 40% of the population is still unconnected. Ours is the most unequal region of the world. 43 of the 50 more violent cities in the world are in Latin America. We badly need to transform our economy through ICT in order to create opportunities, growth, and progress for everyone. We need to improve our political system with more participation and transparency in order to strengthen our democracies and to avoid populism and autocrats. We are tired of debating again and again without concrete solutions about the challenge of the digital economy. This is starting to change, thanks in part for this initiative. It's time to move forward. It's a fantastic news that Internet and Jurisdiction will prepare a regional report for Latin America and the Caribbean. So Bertrand, Paul, Martin, please count with us on the preparation of this report. I'm talking for ASIET, but also for all the stakeholders in Latin America for sure. Latin America, like many other regions in the world, need to tackle very important issues related to Internet jurisdiction. We don't have an European Union. Every country alone, even our giants, Brazil and Mexico, are not so big to define rules for the cross-border digital economy. The reality is that BITs don't use passports, and the Westphalian order is collapsing, or at least is not suitable to tackle the challenge of the digital economy. Just to mention some of the most relevant challenges for us. To create a digital single market, we need to establish some mechanisms to protect consumers and to strengthen privacy rights. To protect citizens, we need to create procedures and agreements to improve collaboration between law enforcement agency and judiciary on access to data. Of course, we need to deal with the challenge related to taxation and BEPS in order to fund our public services. We need to address the asymmetries between nationally regulated players and global unregulated providers. There are big challenges ahead. I could mention many more, but the most important issue right now is how to move from the diagnosis zones to the solution zone. First, from our point of view, prioritize the 5 most critical and urgent issues to solve. It's very important to prioritize. Second, create a multi-stakeholder task force to propose very concrete solutions. Third, move forward through different instances in Latin America, for example, with ILAC, with the Pacific Alliance, with Mercosur, and with bilateral and multilateral agreement. Fourth, establish a yearly report with the progress we made that you are already making, and that is a very good news. Fifth, identify new issues to address and start again. We can lose the opportunity of the digital economy revolution. We need to work together with the strategic support of Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network to increase awareness in our political and economic elites and build answers for the challenge we face based on the evidence. This is the only way to progress for the future of our people, and we can fail. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there interventions from the plenary? If not, I would like to now move to our next discussant. THERESA SWINEHART is Senior Vice President at ICANN and a member of our advisory group, and I take the opportunity to express again a very big thank you to ICANN for their institutional support of this conference. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, and the comments that have already been said are very well versed, and I think it shows the challenges that we have. We'd like to thank you, first of all, for the work underway and the progress that's been made so far, and also for our participation in this event. We participate for a wide range of meetings or reasons. The issue areas oftentimes touch on our remit more generally, but also we have a wide range of stakeholders participating in ICANN that also participate here. So I think it's a very good opportunity. One of the things that's really been coming out is the cross-jurisdictional issues are really impacting us in a wide range of areas with emerging legislative initiatives, regulations that are happening. And we're also noticing the importance of these conversations and factual information and providing technical expertise to avoid unintended consequences of what are really very well-intentioned initiatives more generally. And the reflection that these conversations cannot happen in isolation because of that, to reinforce it. So it's not just the unintended consequences that are important to avoid in the breaking down of the silo discussions, but it's also the aspect of looking at how does one operationalize the conversations that are happening? How does one operationalize the work that is underway here more generally? So from ICANN's perspective, as you know, we coordinate the domain namespace, the unique identifier system. The DNS is not a platform. It actually is what enables one to navigate through the systems and allow the different things to happen. More recently, what we've started to undertake and realize because of the interdependencies in different areas is taking on a role of providing factual information into legislative and regulatory initiatives, providing factual information into those discussions to help inform the dialogue and also to help inform how one might operationalize some of the different areas that are underway. With regards to the way forward for these conversations, I think we've noticed the dependencies that exist, and in the earlier presentations of the different work streams, there's actually some similarities in some of the actions to move forward. So I think that there's some very good opportunities to look at where are there some synergies in the different work streams and where might there be some opportunities to coordinate and leverage those moving forward as part of the work plan with regards to the next phases of coming forward. Having conversations such as these is incredibly important. How we execute on them and actually make it possible to operationalize them is much harder. But with the gifts of the minds in the room and the dedication of everybody involved, I think there's some good opportunities. So we look forward to continuing to participate and look forward to the next steps.
Thank you very much to all this very valuable feedback. The Secretariat takes diligent notes on everything that is said in this session, of course. I take the opportunity to ask if someone wants to intervene before I give the floor to our next discussant to also share their views. So please, if you want, you can raise your hand. I would now like to give the floor to Pearse O'Donohue. Pearse O'Donohue is the Director for Future Networks at DG Connect of the European Commission. And I want to take the opportunity again to thank the European Commission for its institutional support since the beginning, for its support to the new effort, which is the Global Status Report, and also personally to Pearse for serving on the High-Level Advisory Group. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the Commission's commitment and support for the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network is clear, it's stated. But what I want to devote my time now is to say why and what we expect. It's clearly because this is a manifestation of the multi-stakeholder approach in a format that is tackling complex issues. And I'll get straight to the point because I've heard it already from several discussants. Different terms used: the end product, concrete outcomes, conclusions and solutions, or to operationalize what's come here. That's the challenge, because you have managed over a period of years, and it's clear from the discussions yesterday, as well as the reports that we already have to hand, that there is real substance there. How do we actually influence the policy making? Now, not everyone in the room, not everyone who's contributed to this work wants there to be regulation. In fact, many people believe it is the wrong way to go, and I fully appreciate that. But if I just take it from the European Commission's perspective, mapping it against the work that you're already doing, we have our legislation, but also our non-legislative measures in relation to platforms, on online platforms, on notice and takedown, on transparency, which is very important, first of all, from the DNS and the domain jurisdiction point of view, where we would actually like to know how we can better operationalize that, and where there will be a review of how our recent measures have been going. On content even more then, we have of course a number of recent initiatives, including that on the takedown of terrorist content online, which of course has brought to fore very important discussions about the implications for freedom of expression, which is a very delicate and difficult discussion, but one that we have to face up to. And here again, we need to be instructed by the multi-stakeholder community, and we need to have objective, independent arbiters looking at what we're doing to seeing if we are getting right or if the measures are veering off in one direction or another, which is not the desired output. On data, of course, we have the GDPR. We have the free flow of data regulation as well. But here again, we want to look at issues of access. So the work that's being done in that group, again, will be very important. But I would like to repeat the comment that was made about the fact that there are opportunities now, not just in some national parliaments, but with a new commission coming into office at the end of November, where we are already working on what proposals we will put to the College of Commissioners about initiatives there. One of the things that we're considering is, do we need to basically refit and reconsider our rules on e-commerce, which will look at all of the framework for dealing with cross-border and internet interactions, including, of course, notice and takedown, etc. And here, the network has an opportunity to lead, to influence, and to relay the work of the multi-stakeholder community. So I do encourage you to do that. You have our support, but it is time now to, as was said by THERESA, to operationalize the outcome of your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those encouraging words. Are there any interventions? If not, I would like to give the floor now to Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane is the Senior Vice President for Naming and Directory Services of VeriSign, and VeriSign is also a member of the Domains and Jurisdiction Program. And also thank you for having been a member on the advisory group. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Paul. So I'd like to thank you and Bertrand both for allowing me to speak today. And VeriSign, as an original supporter of what was originally the Internet and Jurisdiction Project, are pleased to see that INJ continues to exceed its goals while sticking to its mission. At the Ottawa meeting in 2018, I was a member of the Domain and Jurisdiction Project because VeriSign registers .com and .net, but since we also route to content, we wanted to diversify a little bit and work our way into the content and jurisdiction program this week. Upon entering the room, it was easy to tell there'd be no email checking because the 7 chairs that were intimately placed around our recognizable blue heptagon showed that we were going to have maximal interaction between the groups, which was very helpful. Wolfgang's already given a readout of the session, but my reflection last night, and with the help of some quality barbecue yesterday, I wanted to share some personal observations. The first is granularize. The content and jurisdiction program seems to be very broad. Content is accessed through different mechanisms, whether they be via domain on a platform, and has different use cases. So maybe as we move forward, we should think about having sub-programs within that program itself. The second is harmonize. I think there needs to be a deliberate commingling of the programs. As an infrastructure company, we see how it flows from the domain to the platform to the content, and then what happens with the data as it's generated or passed across borders. We need to make certain that we are thinking the same way across all the programs, and perhaps we can have a session that would identify overlaps and or gaps. Evolve. INJ hasn't just evolved from a project to a network. The attendees have evolved. I noticed that we probably have twice as many government participants as we did in Ottawa. That may be because Canada brought a lot of people here, but the issues around data and domains of content have also evolved over those 17 months. I think I want to make certain that as our work plans evolve over the next 2 years, we continue to ask ourselves, are we asking the right questions? Are we addressing the right issues? Because they too will continue to evolve over the next couple of years. And lastly, exercise. I don't think we can test any of these observations without this policy network focusing on and sponsoring and participating in pilots and exercising using real issues that will hammer out processes and identify additional risks that we don't even talk about here today. Without the exercise, I think our processes and theories collected from the work plans and refined here will be meaningless at first contact. If we can transparently develop a set of meaningful metrics for these exercises, report to them in a harmonized manner through the organization, we'll probably develop a full set of tools and accountabilities for actors, notifiers, and speakers. These are my hopes. We can develop a network that not only facilitates discussion, seeks operational solutions and develop standards, but serves as a resource for all who wish to navigate these waters, but to also address the rights of individuals on par with all actors. Thank you for allowing us to participate here, and we look forward to the next 2 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those words. I would now like to give the floor to Paul Mitchell. Paul Mitchell is the Senior Director of Technology Policy of Microsoft, and Microsoft is both a member of the Data and the Content and Jurisdiction programs. Please, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. So when I had the opportunity to address this event in Ottawa, I noted that to realize the promise of the digital economy and the fourth industrial revolution, we would have to bring our regulatory environment into the 21st century. That same week, the Microsoft warrant case was being argued at the US Supreme Court. The implementation of the EU's general protection regulation was imminent. Fast forward to now, and the warrant case is history. The US has passed the Cloud Act and GDPR is the law. Europe is moving forward with an e-evidence initiative, and Australia just passed a sweeping encryption law. As the effect of each of these is felt, they'll both inform and constrain the viable paths forward for governments around the world. Sadly, the internet, which holds so much promise to benefit society, is also being used to sow division, fuel the rise of populism, and facilitate terrorism, including the recent Christchurch massacre. Events are accelerating, and governments are responding quickly, and we need to be part of that response. We all share an interest in having a secure, predictable, safe environment in cyberspace where human rights are protected, and there's a new sense of urgency globally about the need for strong law and regulation that will restore the promise. There's a new imperative to reform our cooperation mechanisms between countries and work together for solutions. Over the past year and at this conference, we've worked to develop and document operational approaches, including norms, criteria, and mechanisms across realms of data, content, and domains. It's been excellent work, produced through thoughtful discourse and research with multi-stakeholder collaboration. And while we work on operational approaches and frameworks here, we cannot lose sight of the fact that there must ultimately be made operational in law and regulation, with standards agreed among the players and in ways that protect human rights and can be implemented. Governments are moving forward now with legislative and regulatory processes that will have direct operational impact on the internet ecosystem. We need to ensure the excellent outputs of this project are part of those deliberations, and those are happening today, not next year. In particular, I'd urge the I&J project to rapidly develop an engagement plan to move these ideas into those global discussions. For data, we have a range of concrete, actionable ideas in our documents. It's time to do outreach to governments and policymakers around the world to advocate for those recommendations in the documents and land them in appropriate legislation. For content, the Christchurch call provides a concrete context for multi-stakeholder engagement. The Internet and Jurisdiction project can leverage its network and time to convene multi-stakeholder discussions and work to develop consensus recommendations and contributions to that global effort. It's already been joined by many countries and companies, and it can be enriched with further multi-stakeholder, including civil society perspectives that we can bring together. And for domains, many of the ideas we've discussed this week could be the foundation for formal, consensus-based behavioral standards for players across the internet ecosystem that could be referenced and relied upon by governments, policymakers, and regulators, an approach that is working well already for cloud privacy. So in closing, I want to express my thanks to Bertrand and the entire team that's put this together since the beginning of the project, and my appreciation of all the participants. The outputs have come a long way from where they started, but I hope you will agree that progress should be accelerated and that we should actively use these outputs to engage now and not wait for something to be published in 2021. Let's work together to make sure our collective work can have the greatest positive impact. Thank you.
Absolutely, and the Secretariat seconds the point, and this is also part of the strategy of the Secretariat and one of the reasons for hiring dedicated directors for each of the programs to accelerate exactly this and also promote the achievements of the very hard work of stakeholders in the programs of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. One last opportunity before the break for interventions from the floor. Yes, can we have a microphone over there, please?
Thank you. Gregor, Ministry of Justice of Slovenia, Secretary of State. First time attending the conference, and I'm impressed by the work done, and I would like to congratulate primarily the contact groups and their members and moderators for the work done in the past year and especially yesterday, to the organizers and to the hosts for providing a multi-stakeholder approach in the spirit of collaboration, as was put yesterday by Xavier, as really the only way to actually do it. It provides an opportunity to retain internet and the digital environment as the greatest communication and collaboration tool humanity ever developed, as Frane put it before. In order to do this, obviously, we need to suitably address both negative applications of a tool and its nature, which have already profoundly changed the human experience and environment. So the discussions held yesterday, especially in the data and jurisdiction category, are quite timely. Tomorrow, I will be in Luxembourg, attending the EU Council meeting where negotiation mandates will be given to the EU Commission for negotiations between EU and USA regarding e-evidence, as well as regarding the second additional protocol to the Budapest Convention. One can only hope that these and other future negotiations will be held in a similar collaborative and constructive spirits. So that's probably the only way for us to use and not abuse the tools and the human experience that we're given. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other interventions? If there is, yes, there was one? Oh. So, Bertrand, you have the floor.
Yeah, before we get into the break, it is an extremely powerful message that you're sending back, and I'm really elated by the different dimensions. The dimension of outreach and engagement to the global south is something that has been in our minds from the onset, and that we really want to spread and to develop. It is extremely important both to get the feedback, get the engagement, but also to inspire or advocate and spread information. The second dimension that I find really, really striking is the convergent message regarding the timing of things, the articulation with existing processes, and the importance of impact. The message in Ottawa was an extremely strong one towards operational, go towards things that are solutions, not just principles and so on. It is a journey. We all know, and the Christchurch call was mentioned, this is a perfect example of a modicum of convergence by a certain number of actors on the things that have to be done, and now the question is how to do it concretely, and I hope I agree that this will be something where this network can provide suggestions and things in that regard, and we're already discussing this. But I think the message today, and in those 3 days that I personally take very strongly, is the message about impact. It's the message about having the capacity to influence or contribute or convey the common feeling of the actors, so that there's a way to influence and to contribute to the processes around that is not coming, or that is coming in addition to what every single actor does to influence the processes, to have its own positions conveyed, which is completely legitimate, which is necessary and it's part of the process. But I think what we collectively can bring together, and it will be something we will seriously discuss in terms of the methodology in the literally coming months, is what are the tools, what are the instruments of communication that can allow the network as a group to convey something that is perceived precisely as neutral, oriented towards the global interest, reconciling the different objectives, so that what one actor says in one space is coherent with what is being said in another one, and how the neutral the word that comes to mind is actually the authority of neutrality. There is an element that comes out of the work of the multi-stakeholder exercise that gives weight to the fact that it has been elaborated in this way. And I think we have reached a stage, it couldn't have been done before because there was probably not sufficient commonality among the actors. We needed that phase between Ottawa and Berlin. But we now have reached, I think that's the general message, a level of agreement that is not full agreement on everything and at every detail, but that is a sufficient platform, a basis upon which messages can be developed on what has already been achieved, but also make sure that the work of the working groups and the contact groups on an ongoing basis is aware of when and where and to whom messages can be delivered that will actually help the processes and help convey a balanced vision and a reconciling vision. So I just wanted to highlight this because it's the notion of impact, influence, is one that I hear very loud and clear from the different interventions. And the balancing between the need and urgency and the need to have a long-term understanding of what are the consequences of the things that we do is exactly what we're here to do, to plan and to see when it needs to be inserted, when something needs to be contributed, but also not just on a reactive mode, in a proactive mode on the basis of a lengthy and in-depth discussion. With that, we can probably have a break, and we will resume in 30 minutes after this break for the last part, the closing. And as I said before, you will be allowed to enjoy sunny Berlin.